Our extremely horrible Christie polling numbers came back today, and it inspired us to do an update on what some have dubbed the Republican clown car. It's that cornucopia of over a dozen candidates who are scrambling against each other to take down Trump, when many better candidates before them have failed. And keep in mind, that's before Trump won 10 million more votes than any Republican candidate in history. Now, we don't have numbers for all of them. That's a pretty daunting challenge, but we have been able to pack in quite a few. The ones that matter, at least so far. But first, President Donald Trump is still the clear frontrunner. In mid-May, he was up among Republicans by 45 points over his nearest competitor, Ron DeSantis, and up a stunning 56 points over the next closest, Mike Pence. That 60% hurdle that Donald Trump clears is also a really big deal. And before any of you Ron DeSantis admirers out there say that he's going to pick up more swing voters, Donald Trump also led by 23% among all voters, 18% among independents, and even 7 points among Democrats. But on with the show. Christie kicked off his run for the 2024 Republican nomination by publicly trashing Trump and by coming out against bans on transgender-affirming medical treatment. For the record, 78% of Republicans say that the Republican Party is still the party of Donald Trump and the Make America Great movement, and that's back from November when Trump was polling much worse than today. And also, 73% of Republicans approve of laws making it illegal to perform sex change surgery on minors, 62% strongly, and only 21% of them disapprove. Even independents and Democrats are largely for these laws. In the Democrats' case, it's 56% to only 35%. That's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out for him. So far, not too well. Here I'll show you the two questions we asked for Christie so that you get a feel for them before we layer in Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and Mike Pence. Overall, Christie has a 28% favorability rating and a 56% unfavorable rating. That 28% is basically tied with Mitch McConnell, who is our current benchmark for rock-bottom approval ratings, though Christie has a little more not sures, and his unfavorable rating is 8 points lower as a result. Here are the party numbers, and he's at 26% with Republicans, only 8% of whom have a very favorable rating of him. He has a 60% unfavorable rating with Republicans, which is even quite a bit higher than with Democrats. And yes, Christie's current plan is to run as a Republican challenger to Trump. Trump, who, as of our last tally, has a Republican favorability rating, about 50 points higher than Christie's. Only 20% of voters think it's at least somewhat likely that Christie will be the Republican nominee for 2024, and only 6% say very likely. 71% say not likely. Again, to party numbers, where Democrats are far more than anyone else to think Christie will be the Republican nominee, though still only 25% of them think that. Only 16% of Republicans say it's at least somewhat likely, and only 5% of them say very likely. 79% of Republicans say it isn't likely that Christie will win the nomination. So we do have numbers for 5 total non-Trump candidates. So let's start at the top and work down. And the top is Ron DeSantis. He has a 49% favorability rating among all voters, which is about exactly between Trump and Biden. It used to be higher, especially with Republicans, but it dropped almost 10 points since he declared his candidacy, down to its current 70% favorability rating among Republicans. His very favorable rating with Republicans is now 37%, when it was 59%. Higher than Trump's, just in November. Despite that fact, he also has the highest numbers of this crew for likelihood of being nominated. 48% at least somewhat likely among all voters, and 54% among Republicans, though only 10% of Republicans say very likely. There's quite a drop down to Mike Pence, who is the next one, when sorted by Republican likelihood of nomination, though Mike Pence is not first when ranked by favorability. He is only at 39% among all voters, quite a bit lower than even Biden, and his Republican numbers are 41%, which is incredibly low, but not yet near the 28% that Mitch McConnell and Christie have. Seriously though, Republicans like Pence less than all voters like Biden, and that's not good. 29% of all voters say it's at least somewhat likely that Pence gets the nomination, almost 20 points less than DeSantis. But only 23% of Republicans say it's likely, and that's almost 30 points less than DeSantis. Only 7% say Pence is very likely to get the nomination, and 74% of Republicans say not likely. Now, adding in Nikki Haley, her favorability numbers among all voters are 2 points better than Pence's, but she's doing 10 points better among Republicans, with a 51% at least somewhat favorability rating. To give you a gauge, that's worse than McCarthy's done in any of his recent polling. 20% of voters say it's likely that Haley gets nominated, and 22% of Republicans say the same, which is only 1 point less than Mike Pence, though 9% fewer Republicans say it isn't likely she'll be nominated than Pence. Tim Scott continues the trend of favorability going up, but likelihood of being elected going down, which basically means voters don't really know who he is and haven't really judged him yet. Here he has a 24% not sure rating for all voter favorability, whereas Haley had 19% and Mike Pence only had 9%. He has a 43% favorability rating among all voters, but it's 53% among Republicans, which puts him in second place behind DeSantis. But only 21% of all voters and 18% of Republicans say it's likely he's going to be nominated. Only 4% of Republicans say very likely. Now, again, is it early? Yes. Is it likely that something happens that changes these numbers? Yes. But looking at these numbers for Tim Scott, and to some extent Nikki Haley, they really just don't seem to care about their candidacy. Maybe voters have already settled on a candidate they like. But every time you hear someone say that it's early in the cycle, keep in mind that Donald Trump has been campaigning for president for almost 8 years now, and Nikki Haley and Tim Scott barely get any press coverage as of now. But anyway, here are Chris Christie's numbers, and they're clearly worse in every way. There is almost no silver lining to this cloud, except perhaps that 1 point more Republicans say it's very likely he'll be nominated than Tim Scott, though 79% of Republicans, again, say it isn't likely, and 49% of Republicans say it isn't at all likely. To the Chris Christie campaign, I really wished you would have reached out for us. We would have done some accurate and relatively inexpensive exploratory work for you. But that being said, with where we're at now, I really don't have a strategy for you. Chris Christie is starting from a worse place than any of the other Republican candidates we've tested, and he has poll numbers worse than any Republican except Mitch McConnell. And McConnell is basically Voldemort for Republicans. And literally every stance that Chris Christie is in the news for in the last week is something that is completely contrary to where Republicans sit on the issues. It has to be wondered if he's just being funded as another vocal anti-Trump voice. Post your theories in the YouTube comments. Like the video, please subscribe, and thanks for watching.